the way I looked at that tree and said, this is pathetic. This does not look like the picture on the tag. Well, that's okay. It's going to. See, it's going to. Because it has that nature. And because it has that nature, it can't help but be like that. It just is that, whether it looks like it right now or not. Does that make sense? That's what Paul's telling us. We're predestinated to be conformed. Oh, the rest of that story is I planted it and watered it, and a year later still didn't look at no apples, no fruit. I could have come along and said, where's the fruit? I want to see some fruit, No, a year, 2 years, 3 years, several years actually went by, and not much changed. But then I quit looking at it after a while. Probably the best thing I did. And then one day I was driving to church, and I hadn't really noticed, and there was a little apple hanging on the tree. And it was an apple tree after all. And now if you go by there, and please do, go get all the apples. They're the green apples that you have to do something with. If you pick it off and eat it, they're kind of, like green apples taste. But there are more apples on that tree right now than you could know what to do with. It's just full of them. And it's getting more and more every year. Well, it's because that's what it is by nature. And by keeping it watered and nurtured. Did you hear that? Watered and nurtured. If I threatened it, this is my, in the past, I've been in church, I've been on the receiving end of preaching, and sometimes you feel a little threatened. I have. You better straighten up, or God's liable to kick you out. No telling what's liable to happen. And all these threats are supposed to make you act better. It's supposed to make you behave. But that would be like taking that tree when I didn't see any fruit on it and yanking it up out of the ground and shaking it around. You tree, what's with you? I want to see some fruit. Might even make a campfire, hold it over the fire, and threaten with fire. That's not going to. Listen, that isn't going to make the tree. In fact, that's going to be counterproductive. Did you hear that? If I pulled it up out of the ground over and over again and unrooted it and shook it around, it's never going to produce fruit. It's never going to grow either. The only way it's going to grow is to stay rooted and grounded and watered and nurtured. Then it will grow because it has the life in it already. So all those threats and all that sort of stuff is counterproductive in my opinion. Okay, we're predestinated to be conformed to the image of His Son, that He might be the firstborn among many brethren. What he's saying here is He's predestined or pre-planned, made a prearranged destination for us. Now, turn the page to chapter 12 of Romans. This word this word conformed appears in chapter 12, but in a kind of an opposite sense. As I said, chapters 9, 10, and 11, the topic is Israel. Where do they stand with God? And you can verify that by reading it. He starts off chapter 9 by talking about His love for Israel and His desire for them. That's the context, of chapter 9, 10, 11. Chapter 12, he comes back to his thought. Verse 1 says this, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Now, I don't think he literally means, I don't think you should read it strictly in a literal sense. I don't think he literally just means, your physical body and a sacrifice, like putting it up on an altar or something like that. I think he means in a kind of a figurative sense. I think the Message translation gets more close to the meaning that Paul's driving at here. And Anton, if you give me the Message translation, we'll read that. I like what it says, anyway. So here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. Now that says it in a real nice, positive way. Consider your life to be your walking, what's it say? Your ordinary life, sleeping, eating, going to work, walking around life. Consider it as something that you do with your conscience toward God. This is very much like what Paul said about his own life in Galatians 2:20 when he said, the life that I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God. He's talking about the way he lives in his ordinary everyday life. The verse I really wanted to get is, Anton, if you'll get to back to the King James, verse 2. Here's what I wanted to get to in the light of what we just read back in chapter 8. Verse 2 of Romans chapter 12 in the King James says this, and be not conformed to this world. Now, chapter 8, we saw the word conformed, and he said that he has predestinated those who he foreknew to be conformed to the image of his Son, to be conformed, to be shaped or made or to resemble Jesus. Now he says, don't be conformed to the world, to this world, but, here's the contrast now, be ye transformed. Be ye transformed. Well, that's what we're talking about, isn't it? So how, he's talking about the change our outward life. Be ye transformed. Well, how are we going to be transformed? Well, that's a rhetorical question, because here it is right up on the screen, and you know it anyway. Be ye transformed, not the way most people think. He doesn't say, change your life by trying harder, by trying to live up to this. Now that you're a Christian, you better try to live up to it. He doesn't say that. He says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, this is so radical and revolutionary that it kind of slips past us. He says, this is the way the transformation takes place. Change your thinking. Change the way you think. About what? About the weather? About my car? About current events? No, about yourself. Not all these extraneous things. He means about yourself. Change the way, renew your mind, change the way. See, he's talking about you and your life and living your life. Renew your mind, change the way you think about who you are. You're not who you might possibly think you are. You are a new creation in Christ, like we sang this morning. Any man, any person being Christ, he's a new creation. Old things have passed away. Everything's been made new. By the renewing of your you got to change it. Change the way you think. Because there is something on the inside of you that is different, and it shows up. You facilitate it showing up by changing how you think, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. The word prove there means to make manifest or to demonstrate, to make plain God's will. And well, we already know what His perfect will is for our lives. We just read in chapter 8, to be conformed to the image of His Son. Now, sometimes we read this verse and think about it in terms of what does God want me to do? Should I take this job? Should I take that job? Should I move here? Those kind of things. That's okay. But what he really is talking about here is that God's will that you be conformed to the image of His Son, facilitated by changing of your thinking. Now, this word transformed is an interesting word. In the Greek language, the word transformed in this verse is a Greek word that is like this, metamorpho with two O's on the end. Metamorpho in the Greek. You can check in Strong's Concordance and you'll see it there. And the interesting thing about it, if you look that up, it only appears 4 times in the New Testament. This verse is one of them, that you be metamorphosed. See, that's like our word metamorphosis. We know that word, don't we? You learned that in biology class at school. Remember the story about the caterpillar gets into the cocoon, right? He goes into the cocoon and he's a caterpillar, but when the cocoon opens, he's a beautiful butterfly. Well, what happened? Well, a metamorphosis took place. And Paul here says, you are undergoing a metamorphosis. Now, you could think about your outward life as like a cocoon. Your old life is like a cocoon housing something that's new. And it comes out. And God's perfect will is, and He's predestinated us as the end point for it to be fully manifested, that new life on the inside. Now, to understand this word a little better, I want to look at some of those other passages. There's only 4 in which this word is used. One of them is found in Mark chapter 9, if you look there with me. Anton will put it on the screen beginning with verse 1. Here's another instance of this word, metamorphosis, metamorpho, Mark chapter 9. And this hopefully will give us a little insight into how this understanding is. Mark chapter 9, and beginning with verse 1, it says this. Now he said unto them, that's Jesus talking now, verily I say unto you, there be some of them that stand here, which shall not taste of death, till they have seen the kingdom of God come with power. Now for some people that's a troubling verse, because obviously all the disciples and all those that heard him say that have all died. They've gone to the term of their life, they've lived out their lives. And if you think he means by the kingdom of God some big external change of the political system like that, you're missing the boat, or it doesn't make sense. You see, the kingdom of God is not like the kingdom of man. The kingdom of man is an outward visible thing, established, and I hate to be so blunt as to say this, man's kingdom is established by force, and is maintained by force. And if you don't believe that, just get crosswise with them, and you'll find out that they know how to use force to get what they want. Man's kingdom is established by force, and then from the outside, man's kingdom tries to change hearts and minds from the outside. God doesn't work that way. God gets a hold of the inside first. His